Good afternoon, everyone. Um, Welcome to the first of our educational series webinars. We'll be presenting these on a few different topics once a month for the next 6 months or so. So hopefully you'll find them useful. And this one will encourage you to join some of the others as well. It's the first one I've done for a little while, so bear with me if it's not quite as smooth as I might like it to be. But yeah, there's the question and answers panel for you to ask any questions as we go along. I'll go through the presentation first, and then when we get to the end, I'll see if there's any questions. We'll answer kind of what we can. If there's anything in there that we can't answer, then we'll kind of get back to people on email afterwards. The webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to take a look again if you want to go back over anything or if you miss anything. Once that's done, and I believe the links will be sent to you to view those kind of in the coming days once we're finished. So today's webinar is kind of looking at game demands, identifying them, and then using those to inform your training and sort of using it to train as you play and maximize kind of what you're getting out of the Firstbeat system. Just to kind of introduce myself, my own background. So I spent a number of years working in professional football in the UK at a couple of different clubs, and have been with Firstbeat since 2017. So yeah, so hopefully you have a good appreciation of kind of day-to-day life in professional sport. Obviously, yeah, both of my professional experience is football, so kind of a lot of my examples and things will come from that, but you can extrapolate those to more or less any sport, certainly any team sport. The examples will be applicable across those. So yeah, so don't worry if the examples are all football or soccer, like they'll be equally applicable to basketball, hockey, whatever it is your kind of your background is and your current organization is. So as I mentioned, we're kind of looking at identifying game demands and using that, and we'll run through these different topics through this short webinar. So firstly, looking at how to identify the game demands and why we do it. Then considering the differences between the game as a whole and shorter periods and why it's kind of important to keep those elements in mind rather than just looking at the whole game. And then a couple of kind of practical examples on using it for within a longitudinal context. So maintaining your training big picture over time, and then also then looking at maximal intensity periods and what they are and how you can use them within your daily work. So first of all, I suppose that the first question to answer is why do we need to identify the demands of the game we're playing? And ultimately, it's what we're training towards. So if you don't know what you're training towards, it kind of makes it difficult to plan that. So you need to know what your athletes need to be ready for. And without that information, obviously you can take informed kind of estimates and use your experience to kind of know roughly what they're looking for. But actually, if you can put objective numbers on it, then it makes it far easier to analyze the data you're getting and plan accordingly. So yeah, we obviously need to understand the demands of the activity, because soccer and ice hockey are very different, for example, in terms of like the physiological profiles. Soccer more kind of a bit more continuous, whereas ice hockey players are continually kind of on and off the ice, have shorter, higher intensity bursts. So we need to kind of know the differences for our own specific sports. And doing so then allows us to plan accordingly. So both the training that we're doing, but then also the recovery that we need to allow, the nutrition, everything like that on both a daily and kind of long-term basis. And as I've already touched upon, it allows us to maintain longitudinal load a bit better if we're not collecting game data. And I'll get a bit more specific on that in a moment. But first of all, I suppose the how to do it, I think it's fairly obvious, is collect some game data if you can. I know that some competitions don't allow that. So use practice games, pre-season games, whatever sort of match play you can get access to for collecting data. it's all valuable. So even if you're not able to get like your league games, your competition games, you can still get some valuable data that allows you to kind of get a picture of what a game really looks like. And there's a number of kind of key variables that we'll be looking at kind of within this presentation. So primarily trimp and trimp per minute. So you'll be looking at trimp to establish kind of the whole volume of the game, like what is the total training load that a game will place upon a player. And then we'll be looking at trimp per minute for the shorter periods within the whole. And then you also likely want to kind of have a look at training effect. So I don't go into that too much in this particular presentation because I think the next one that we have is focusing on training effect a bit more. But that kind of then takes all of the data that the system is collecting and kind of summarizes how hard that any given game or training session was and gives you a good summary of kind of the metabolic demands from that particular game or session. So as I've already mentioned, looking at the whole of the game and then the shorter periods within it can kind of give quite different pictures of what is required of the players. So by looking at the whole, like I said, you get an idea of like the overall volume of work that they're being asked to do. Yeah, like how obviously how long it takes, what the total kind of loading is, and then how that kind of impacts within your week and the total sort of loads that the players would need to do within that week. But you also need to consider like the shorter periods within the game to sort of get a real true kind of idea of the demands that are being placed and the intensities that they're having to go through. So for the example I've given there, like a typical trim total for a soccer match can range anywhere from sort of 150 to 250 would be sort of the typical range. Obviously, some individuals will do more than that, some might do less. Positional demands can make quite a big difference, and demands of the game, whether it's a hard game, easy game, and so on. And when you kind of break that down per minute, that kind of like gives figures between 1.6 and 2.7, 2.8, which is relatively low intensity still. Yeah, if you were only ever basing your trim per minute targets on kind of the whole match value, they'd probably be undercooking the players. You wouldn't be kind of exposing them to the kind of intensities that they'll actually face. So, like again, the example I've given there, like you can see 2 minute intensities that are actually more at 4 trim per minute. So it's quite a lot higher than the whole game average. So we kind of, yeah, that's where we need to consider that. And we need to know those shorter periods to be able to, yeah, like I said, understand sort of the worst case scenario, which is like the most that the players are going to be likely to be asked to do within a game, or as we call it within the system, it's referred to as maximal intensity periods. So if you do see either of those two phrases, they're kind of meaning the same thing. So in terms of using like whole load, or the whole game load, we've already mentioned that some leagues and some competitions don't allow the use of tracking technology in competition, or you may just choose that you don't want your athletes wearing the sensors or anything like that within a game just because that they might not be happy to. You might prefer them not to. But it's still, so that then is load that is missing from kind of our weekly, monthly, yearly training volumes. So within the system, we have a manual exercise feature, and that allows you to input training load from any missed sessions, missed games. So you can still maintain more accurate acute and chronic loads. So you kind of have a picture of what they've done each week, what they've done over the previous month, and then how that plans out over the season. So yeah, it's quite valuable and important to kind of put those figures into your training load picture, because like I said, there it allows you to manage the progressions a bit better. It allows it, like when you're reviewing, if you're looking back at maybe if someone's been injured, you want to kind of look at what their overall training loads have been in the run up to that injury, for example, Has there been a sudden increase? Maybe it's a player who has been on the bench more and then is asked to start a game, so that as a result of that, their load goes up quite quickly. If you're not plugging those game data values in, you would potentially miss that sort of thing. Whereas if you're putting in some estimated values, then you're kind of getting a picture of how that load has changed for that individual. So the manual exercise feature, as you put a screenshot on the right, it allows you to tailor it by individual. So if you know their actual game values, you can overtype the estimated trims that is shown in the right-hand column at the bottom of that screenshot. Or if you don't, you can still take an estimate by using an RPE-based 1 to 10 scale and the durations, and then it will calculate that for you as is shown there. And so then moving on to looking at some of the shorter periods. So I've mentioned maximal intensity periods already. So that's looking at the kind of the highest intensity over a certain duration within your data. So for example, if we want to know what is the kind of the highest intensity 4-minute period that an individual might face, that can automatically pick it out for you. It is available for both trim per minute and movement intensity. So the accelerometer equivalent of the trim values, and goes from anything from 30 seconds to all the way up to 2 hours. So kind of covers a really broad range of different durations that you might be interested in. And the feature itself effectively is a rolling window throughout the whole measurement. It will go through second by second and look for the 2-minute, 3-minute, 4-minute period, whatever it is you've chosen as the most relevant. Find the highest intensity one, and it will put that data out for you. So kind of a visual representation of it. This is your time period you're interested in. It's rolling throughout the whole measurement to find the most intense period. And then it may identify that perhaps this particular part was the highest intensity 4-minute period within your game, within your measurement. So although it's not got the peak heart rate, the full 4-minute, this would be the highest intensity part within it. That then all gets put into the data export feature. So you can see, yes, you get all of the different time values are exported into the data export. And this is just a small snapshot within it, but you get values like this for each individual from your game, your lap, your whole measurement, kind of whatever analysis periods you've chosen. So what that allows us to do is then when we're actually planning our sessions, we can kind of define how intense or how hard we want our players to train. So like a common drill duration in soccer is maybe 4 minutes. So you might decide that we're doing a set of small-sided games with 4-minute repetitions, and we want these to be equivalent to game intensity for a 4-minute period. So we can pick out from our export, we can pick out what the kind of the values we would expect to see for 4 minutes. So in this particular case, you can see it's around 3.8, 3.7. So then within that, we decide that we want each of our reps within this to be a trim per minute intensity of 3.7. So in practical terms, what that means is we're clipping laps within our sessions, either doing that live or post. And then I would also kind of suggest creating like a cheat sheet of your maximal intensity periods that are of most interest to you, because you're probably not going to be using every single one from the 30 seconds up to 2 hours. So you'll have a kind of a bank of drills that you use that perhaps have a common sort of set of durations. So maybe you use like 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and 10 minutes. Maybe that's sort of how you structure your training. So you would export your data out via Excel, create a table with just the durations of interest, and and then save that, and then you kind of use that as your reference point for then when you're analyzing your training. So if in this example we've had our players have done their session, this is like a view from one lap. We know that this player for a 4-minute drill would have a trim per minute value of 2.81. In this particular one, he's done 2.78. So it's kind of, yeah, it's more or less close enough. It's like 98, 99% of the intensity we wanted. So we know that that's okay. And he's kind of hit the targets that we wanted him to. So you would then use that when you're reviewing your sessions afterwards. So when you've kind of collected all your data in, downloaded it all, and have clipped it all up, got all your drills there, you can then use your cheat sheet and your session report to kind of review, has everyone done what we want? Like you might just look at it on a whole team basis, and then look for any obvious outliers and just look at those, or you may go through one by one. Kind of depends what is of interest to you on that given day. So yeah, so that's kind of everything. I've gone through quite quickly, I think, but hopefully I've kind of covered the basics and give you an idea of how you can use some of these features to kind of maximize the game load and why it's got value. So in summary, we've looked at like why we want to look at the game values and how to kind of collect those. We need to consider the whole and shorter periods within it, because if you only look at the whole of the game, it's kind of going to give you a false picture of the true intensities that are involved. And yes, you can use that volume data for maintaining your longitudinal, acute and chronic loads, and then using laps and maximal intensity periods to analyze your specific drills. So did they hit the targets we wanted? Review and then like make alternative plans for future. Maybe if you've had a drill that nobody kind of quite hit what you were looking for, you might need to review the rules of that particular drill, or the kind of the parameters you use within it to allow them to reach the intensities that you're looking for. There's a few useful links here. So for practical side of it, so where you can find instructions on the different features and some videos on our YouTube channel as well. I'll leave those on screen. We've got a couple of questions, so I'll just have a quick look at those. So if you bear with me a moment while I read those. Okay. Right. So yeah, recommendation. So the first question we've had in was, what would be your approach / recommendation for finding out the most relevant maximal intensity durations for your specific sport? So I think that's going to be a case of, you knowing your name. So like, for example, or you knowing your game, sorry, not your name. So if you were, working with ice hockey, for example, you would probably have an idea of the kind of shift durations that your players are doing. So if it was like, if they're regularly swapping after 1 minute, you would probably look at like your 1 minute, maybe 2 minute, and your 30-second durations, for example. Likewise, basketball, you would know sort of what the normal kind of work periods are before they get any rest. So between your shot, it might be like your shot clock durations, that sort of thing. It's kind of knowing the demands of your particular sport and what the kind of working it around the actual rules of the game, but also the typical kind of structure of it. So like I said, football is commonly uses like a 4-minute drills. But yeah, you might find that you prefer, or for the way your team plays, it's more like 2 minutes, or sort of there's no right or wrong. It's sort of whatever you feel works best for your particular sport. And then our second question, so why is it 30 seconds minimum for the trim per minute and not less for like it is for the movement load? So that kind of comes down to the calculations a bit. I think if you go lower on trim per minute, you won't see any real difference between like 30 seconds and 5 seconds, because there's that slight lag in heart rate response and stuff. So we found when we were kind of putting it together that there wasn't really any value in having those shorter durations for the trim per minute stuff, whereas movement load is instantaneous. And yeah, when the player moves, that's sort of automatically and instantaneously picked up by the accelerometer, hence why for like a 5 minute, sorry, a 5 second period of work, that does show up as a difference on the accelerometer, whereas with the trim values, it doesn't show up really. So we kind of made the decision that 30 seconds was the shortest duration for trim per minute that actually was worthwhile. Anything below that didn't really show much difference. Yeah, so that's our two questions. Do we have any other questions anyone else wants to type in before we round off? We've gone, yeah, 20 minutes, so that was about right. Obviously, if you have any questions afterwards, if you think of anything later this evening, tomorrow, in the coming days, then by all means get in touch. The next session is in 4 weeks' time, I think, on the 27th of February. And then there's a full list, the link shown there. Yeah, if you do have questions, you might more than welcome to email me or email us on customercare@firstbeat.com, which will come to our kind of general for customer care inbox that a few of us have access to. So we'll be able to help as well with any questions. Hopefully you found it interesting and beneficial and will join us for the next one. But if we have no further questions, I will say thank you and good afternoon.